The galaxy was vast, silent, and endless. Stars burned like frozen lanterns in the dark, each one a world of its own, and in that endless ocean, signals often traveled unnoticed. But this one was different. It was weak, broken, and filled with a sound no one could ignore, the sound of desperation. Far beyond the edge of known space, a small listening post orbiting Earth caught the signal first. At first, the technicians thought it was static, just the universe whispering its usual noise. But when they cleaned the data, the sound became clearer. A voice, trembling and broken, echoed through the speakers. It was not human, not even close. But the pain in it was something every heart could recognize. Please, help us. They are coming. They will kill us all. The words cut through the silence like a blade. For a moment, the control room froze. Officers leaned closer. Engineers replayed the signal, and nobody dared to breathe. Humanity had always wondered if the galaxy was friendly, hostile, or indifferent. Now, here was the answer. Someone out there was in mortal danger. Someone had cried out for salvation, and Earth had heard. News spread fast. Within hours, the signal was carried to the highest councils of Earth. Generals, admirals, and leaders gathered in a chamber deep beneath the United Nations headquarters. The room was heavy with silence, broken only by the replay of that faint, desperate cry. Some looked pale, others angry, and a few whispered questions no one could answer. Who were they? What hunted them? And why had they called for Earth of all places? No map could pinpoint their world. The signal was fractured, its coordinates half lost to interference. But one thing was certain. It was real. The Plea was not a trick of radio, waves, or imagination. A civilization far away was dying, and somehow their call had reached Earth. Around the table, arguments flared. One admiral slammed his fist down, warning that this could be a trap. Aliens could be testing us, he said, his voice sharp. They could be luring our fleets into an ambush. We cannot risk our strength on shadows. But another leader, an old general who had fought Earth's last great war, leaned forward with fire in his eyes. And what if it is not a trap? What if it is real? Then we sit here in silence while billions die? Is that who humanity has become? The room grew heated. Some spoke of caution, others of duty, and still others of power. Yet beneath the debate, one truth settled in everyone's mind. Humanity had survived wars, plagues, and disasters by standing together. They were not the kind to turn away from the helpless. Meanwhile, across Earth, ordinary people began to hear fragments of the story. The cry leaked through military channels and into the public net. Citizens listened to that trembling alien voice on their screens, and something stirred deep inside them. It was not fear. It was anger. Humanity knew what it meant to be desperate, to stand at the edge of extinction. And they would not ignore someone else standing there now. In hidden corners of the galaxy, powerful empires had long whispered that Earth was a sleeping giant. Humans were tough, dangerous, survivors born on a world of storms and predators. They could fight when pressed, but they rarely stepped into the wider stage of galactic affairs. To many, Earth was quiet, small, distant, but that silence was about to end. As the council session stretched on, one voice rose above the rest. A diplomat, calm but firm, spoke what everyone already knew in their hearts. This plea reached us for a reason. If the galaxy wishes to test humanity's will, then let them see it. If the weak cry for aid, then let them know Earth answers. Not with hesitation, not with whispers, but with fire. The words spread like wildfire. Across military bases, warships stirred. Across academies, soldiers stood taller. Across shipyards, engineers sharpened their tools. The decision was not yet official, but humanity was already moving. They could not sit and wait, not after hearing that voice. And still, the recording played. Again and again the broken alien voice begged in the darkness, Please, help us. They are coming. They will kill us all. Each time the words echoed, they struck deeper. Each time they ignited more resolve. And so, the galaxy had changed, in that single moment. The silent Earth, the distant Earth, the Earth that many thought would stay hidden forever, had just been called. And when humanity was called, it never came quietly. No one in that council chamber, no one in the listening posts, and no one watching across Earth truly understood what was about to happen. But history would remember this moment. It was the spark before the firestorm, the breath before the thunder, the cry before the fury. The galaxy had begged for help, and Earth had heard, and somewhere, far in the shadows of the stars, those who had sent the desperate signal prayed. They prayed that whoever had received their cry was strong enough. They prayed that help would come before their world was ash and silence. They did not yet know it, but the help they called would come, and it would not come as a whisper or as a candle in the night. It would come as a storm, as steel and fire, as the unstoppable wrath of humanity. The cry across the stars had been answered, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The chamber was silent, yet the silence carried weight like a storm waiting to break. The alien cry for help still echoed from the speakers, the words faint and broken, but sharp enough to pierce every mind present. Earth's leaders sat in a circle, generals in crisp uniforms, admirals with eyes hardened by years of command, and politicians who carried the weight of billions of lives on their shoulders. The first to speak was Admiral Rowan, his voice sharp as steel. "We do not know who sent this. We do not know who hunts them. For all we know, this is bait. If we move too quickly, we risk the lives of our fleets on a phantom enemy. The galaxy is full of predators. Do you really think one dying world would call on Earth out of all the stars?" The words stirred murmurs. Suspicion was natural, but then General Vasquez slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising with fire. "And what if it is not bait? What if it is real? Will we sit here counting risks while a civilization is slaughtered? Humanity has been hunted before. We know the sound of desperation." That voice was not a trick. That was fear, raw and real. And if we ignore it, we are no better than the monsters who hunt them. A young diplomat leaned forward, her voice calm but edged with passion. "Generals, admirals, you speak of danger, of traps, but listen carefully. Whoever sent that message was not thinking of politics. They were thinking of survival. They reached across the void hoping someone, anyone, would listen. And by chance or fate, it reached Earth. That is not coincidence. That is responsibility." The room divided quickly. One half argued for caution, insisting Earth should strengthen its borders and prepare for possible deception. The other half demanded action, declaring that humanity could not remain silent when a cry for help echoed across the stars. The debate raged for hours. Voices clashed like swords, suspicion battled with duty, and every second felt like an eternity. The alien plea replayed in the background, haunting every word spoken. Finally, the United Earth Chancellor rose. She was old, her hair silver, her eyes sharp as the edge of a blade. When she spoke, the chamber fell into silence. "I was a child, when Earth nearly destroyed itself in war," she said slowly. "I remember the silence of cities turned to dust. I remember the cries of people begging for help that never came. We swore as a species never to let that happen again. Not to ourselves and not to anyone else." She pointed at the hollow screen where the alien voice flickered in static. "This is not politics. This is not strategy. This is a test, not of our strength but of our soul. Humanity does not turn away. Humanity answers." For a moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, heads began to nod. The weight of her words struck deep. Humanity had clawed its way out of wars, disasters, and endless struggles. They had become stronger not because they ignored suffering, but because they never abandoned hope. The decision was made. Earth would answer the cry for help. But the Council also knew They could not send a whisper into the dark. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and watching. If humanity moved, they would move with power. Admiral Rowan, once cautious, now leaned forward. If we send aid, it cannot be small. If we are to show ourselves, then let the galaxy see the full measure of Earth's strength. Let them understand what it means to awaken the fury of humanity. Plans unfolded quickly. Warships were called from every corner of the solar system. Massive orbital shipyards lit up with activity. Engineers worked without sleep, soldiers drilled without pause, and fleets assembled like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Still, tension lingered in the chamber. One senator asked the question everyone feared. And if we lose? What if our wrath is not enough? The chancellor answered with a single, steady voice. Then we fall with honor. But if we do nothing, if we sit in silence, then we have already lost who we are. Those words ended the debate. Humanity would not hesitate. Humanity would not hide. They would answer the cry for help, no matter the cost. Outside the chamber, across Earth, the news spread. The people had already heard the desperate alien voice. Now they heard the decision. Earth was sending its fleets. Cheers erupted in cities. Crowds gathered around screens, chanting the old words humanity had always carried in its heart. No one fights alone. For the first time in centuries, Earth was united in purpose, not for conquest, not for greed, but for something purer, justice. And yet in the shadows of the galaxy, those who had sent the cry still waited. Their worlds burned, their skies darkened with enemy fleets, and their hearts prayed that help would come in time. They had no idea what kind of power they had awakened. For, when Earth answered, it did not answer softly. It answered with fury beyond imagination. The order had been given. Earth would answer the cry. And with that single decision, the quiet blue world at the edge of the galaxy began to stir like a giant waking from its sleep. Across the solar system, shipyards thundered to life. Massive orbital rings glowed with sparks as engineers rushed to complete warships that had been waiting in silence. Welding torches lit up the dark of space, forging steel into shapes meant for war. Hulls longer than cities were dragged from dry dock. Engines that could split the stars were tested until the void itself trembled. The heart of humanity's power, the Imperial Sovereign-class destroyers, awakened. They were not ships. They were monsters of steel, wrapped in armor thicker than mountains, carrying weapons that could burn continents from orbit. For decades they had rested in silence, guardians of Earth's pride. Now, one by one, their engines roared, and their shadows stretched across the stars. But it was not only machines that answered the call. On the ground, soldiers prepared for a war none of them could imagine. Young recruits, their hands still trembling, marched beside veterans whose eyes had seen battle before. Training grounds echoed with the clash of steel, the thunder of boots, the crack of rifles. Every soldier knew the risk. They were heading into the unknown, to fight an enemy no one had seen. Yet not a single one turned away. Humanity does not run, their commanders told them. We do not hide. We fight. In the academies, tacticians bent over maps and simulations. They studied the signal, measured distances, guessed at possibilities. Was it an empire? A horde? A force of raiders? No one knew. But one thing became clear. Whoever hunted those aliens was powerful, powerful enough to drive them to desperation. If humanity was to win, it would not be with hesitation. It would be with overwhelming fire. Factories on Earth and Mars burned day and night, pouring out weapons, armor, and supplies. Thousands of drones were launched into orbit, carrying equipment and munitions. Convoys of freighters lined up in space, loaded with the tools of war. Civilian engineers volunteered in droves, saying only one thing. If they called for us, we will not fail them. And still, the cry for help played. Across the war rooms it was replayed again and again. Every time it echoed, every time that broken alien voice begged for salvation, another spark of anger burned inside humanity. It was no longer only about answering a call. It was about proving something to the galaxy. For centuries, the other species of the stars had whispered about Earth. They called it a death world, a cradle of storms and predators where only the strongest could survive. They warned that humans were dangerous, stubborn, unyielding. Yet they also believed humanity was small, unimportant, too distant to matter in the great affairs of empires. Now, the galaxy would learn. From Luna's dark shipyards, the first destroyer launched, Vanguard. Its hull gleamed black as night, its weapons glowing faintly in the void. Behind it came Retribution, Solaris, and Iron Will. Carriers rose next, their decks bristling with fighters, sleek ships shaped like blades of light. The fleet was forming, not a handful of vessels, but an armada. The people of Earth watched as their skies filled with fire. Children pointed as warships passed overhead, their engines rumbling like thunder. Families gathered in cities to cheer as soldiers boarded transports. Old veterans stood in silence, saluting as banners rose once more. And somewhere in the void, hidden predators surely watched. Empires and warlords listening across the stars would see the storm rising. Some laughed, thinking humanity was reckless. Others trembled, remembering the old warnings about Deathworlders. But all of them knew Earth was no longer silent. Inside the flagship Valiant, Admiral Rowan stood before his crew. He had once spoken against this mission, but now his eyes burned with iron. "We do not know who the enemy is," he said, his voice carrying through the decks. "But we know who we are. We are humanity." And when a desperate voice called to us, we answered. Not with fear, not with whispers, but with fury. Let the galaxy see what Earth is made of. The crew roared in answer. Engineers slammed their fists against consoles. Pilots gripped their helmets. Soldiers raised their rifles high. The spirit of humanity, forged through centuries of struggle, now burned brighter than ever, and so the armada grew. Hundreds of ships, thousands of fighters, millions of soldiers, all forged by one desperate signal. All prepared to unleash a storm the galaxy had never seen. For humanity had been shaped by fire and trial. They were the children of storms, the heirs of struggle born on a world that never forgave weakness. And now, they would carry that legacy to the stars. The galaxy did not yet understand. The enemies who hunted the desperate aliens did not yet know. But soon, very soon they would see. For Earth's fleets were no longer shadows in the dark. They were fury made steel. And when that fury was unleashed, nothing in the galaxy could stand against it. The fleet cut through the void like a blade of fire. Dozens of destroyers, carriers, and cruisers moved as one, their engines glowing against the endless night. On every bridge, tension filled the air. Soldiers checked their weapons again and again. Pilots whispered to their machines, and commanders studied the maps with grim eyes. They all knew they were flying into the unknown. At first, the alien system looked quiet. A sun burned faintly, its light weak compared to Earth's star. But as the fleet drew closer, the truth was revealed. The system was a graveyard. A planet lay below, once green and alive, now scarred and burning. Cities that might have stretched for miles were reduced to skeletons of steel. Vast craters smoked where bombs had fallen, and oceans glowed red with fire. The screams of survivors echoed faintly across comms, broken by static but filled with pain. Humanity had seen war before, but never like this. The fleet fell silent. No one spoke as they watched. For some it was rage, for others, sorrow. But for all, it was a promise. Above the burning planet, an enemy armada waited. Hundreds of ships, vast and brutal, circled the skies like vultures. Their designs were jagged, cruel, built for destruction rather than honor. The moment humanity's fleet arrived, the predators turned. They had not expected resistance. They had not expected challengers. Now they faced Earth. On the flagship Valiant, Admiral Rowan stood tall. His voice, calm but sharp, echoed through every ship in the fleet. "You see what they have done, you see the ashes they leave behind. There will be no retreat. There will be no mercy. Today, humanity answers the call. Unleash the fury. And, with that, the void exploded. Missiles streaked from the destroyers, lighting the black sky with fire. Carriers launched waves of fighters, their engines screaming as they dove into the enemy lines. Cannons thundered, beams of light cut across the stars, and the silence of space turned into a storm of death. The enemy roared back, their ships swarming in countless numbers. Jagged cruisers spat fire, massive battleships hurled plasma that tore through the void. The battle became chaos, ships colliding in a storm of flame and steel. But humanity fought like no other. Their destroyers moved with brutal precision, shields flaring, weapons cutting through hulls like knives. Fighters darted like shadows, striking weak points and vanishing before enemy guns could lock on. Everywhere, human resolve burned brighter than fear. On the surface of the dying planet, survivors looked to the skies. They saw the battle raging above, the blackness split by fire, and their hearts dared to hope. For the first time in months, the predators were not alone in the heavens. For the first time, someone fought for them. A child clung to her mother as fire reigned above. "Who are they?" she whispered. Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she watched the human fleet blaze. "They are the answer," she said. "They are the storm." Back in orbit, the battle raged hotter. One human cruiser, Resolute, was struck by 3 enemy beams. Its hull split, flames bursting across its decks. For a moment it seemed doomed, but the crew held. Even as the ship burned, its cannons kept firing, tearing through 2 enemy frigates before finally falling silent. Their sacrifice was not in vain. Every loss only sharpened the fleet's wrath. For every human ship destroyed, 5 enemies fell. For every cry of pain, 10 answered with fury. Humanity was not the largest power in the galaxy, but they fought with a will that no empire could match. Then the flagship Valiant fired its main cannon. The weapon roared like thunder, a beam of pure fire ripping through space. It struck the enemy battleship at the heart of the formation, tearing it apart in a single blow. The explosion lit the skies so bright that even survivors on the planet's surface could see it. And when they saw it, they cheered. The predators began to falter. They had expected an easy slaughter. They had not expected resistance. And they had never imagined humanity. Hours passed, but the fury never dimmed. Finally, the enemy armada broke, their ships scattered, fleeing into the black. Humanity did not chase. They had done what they came for. They had broken the predator's grip. As silence returned to the system, the fleet hovered above the scarred planet. Dropships prepared to descend, carrying aid, supplies, and soldiers. Humanity was not only there to fight, they were there to save. On the bridge of the Valiant, Admiral Rowan looked at the burning world below. "Mark this day," he said quietly. "The galaxy will remember." When the desperate cried out, humanity answered, and we answered with fire. The words spread through every comm, every ship, every soldier's heart. They were not just words. They were truth. Below, survivors lifted their eyes to the sky. The stars that once brought only fear now shone with new meaning. For humanity had come, not as conquerors, not as lords, but as fury forged in compassion. And somewhere in the shadows of the galaxy, other civilizations listened. Some trembled, some grew fearful, others whispered warnings. But all of them knew Earth was no longer silent. The cry for help had been answered, and humanity's wrath had been unleashed. The smoke of battle still drifted through the void. Burned hulls floated like broken bones across the stars, silent reminders of the fury that had just been unleashed. Human ships moved slowly through the debris, searching for survivors, marking the dead and securing what remained. The cries for help had been answered, and Earth had carved its answer into the heavens with fire. On the planet below, the survivors emerged from the ruins. Their cities were broken, their world scarred, but their eyes turned upward with something they thought had long been lost: hope. For weeks they had lived under the shadow of predators, waiting for the end. Now, above them, the skies carried a new shadow, humanity's fleet, vast and unbroken. Dropships roared down through the atmosphere. They landed among shattered buildings and smoking craters. Out stepped human soldiers, their armor gleaming, their banners rising against the wind. They did not come as conquerors. They came with food, medicine, and strong hands to lift the weak. The first survivor, an old alien elder with trembling limbs, fell to his knees before the soldiers. He could not speak their language, but his tears said everything. Humanity lifted him gently to his feet. "Stand," a soldier said softly. "You are not alone anymore." Across the planet, cheers rose as supplies were handed out, as wounded were carried to safety, as soldiers stood guard against the night. The survivors looked at these strangers, these humans, and saw not monsters, but saviors. Back in orbit, the fleet gathered in silence. The victory was theirs, but it carried a weight. They had revealed themselves to the galaxy, and the galaxy would not forget. Messages were already spreading across the stars, carried by traitors, spies, and survivors. They told of a fleet that had arrived without warning. They told of ships like mountains, of cannons like thunder, of humans who fought like demons and stood like protectors. And soon, the galaxy listened. In the halls of great empires, rulers frowned as they heard the reports. Some dismissed them, calling the tales exaggerated. Others grew silent, remembering the old whispers, that humanity, children of a death world, were dangerous beyond measure. Warlords who once mocked Earth now stared into the void with unease. The predators who had fled scattered into the shadows, whispering warnings to one another, never provoke the humans again. On the flagship Valiant, Admiral Rowan stood before the comms, his face hard as iron. Across the fleet, every ship, every soldier, every survivor listened. His voice carried like a storm. "Today we answered a desperate call. We did not come for conquest. We did not come for glory. We came because we heard the cry of the helpless. And to those who prey on the weak, hear this now. When you raise your hand against the innocent, humanity will rise. And when we rise, we do not rise quietly. We rise with fury beyond imagination." His words spread not only through the fleet, but across the stars. The message was transmitted, broadcast, and repeated until it reached even the farthest edges of the galaxy. And that message carried more than warning. It carried promise. For those who lived in fear, hiding in shadows, it carried hope. They now knew there was a force in the galaxy that would not ignore them, that someone would answer when they cried out, that humanity had declared itself not as conquerors, but as guardians of justice. For those who thrived on cruelty, it carried terror. They had seen what a single human fleet could do. They had seen predators broken and scattered in hours, and they knew, deep inside, that if humanity's fury was ever turned fully upon them, there would be no escape. On Earth, news of the battle filled the screens. People watched as the fleet stood victorious, as survivors bowed in gratitude, as banners of humanity rose across alien skies. Cheers filled the streets, children waved flags, veterans saluted their screens. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, and they had done so not as weaklings, not as victims, but as a storm. The survivors of the ruined planet would remember this day forever. To them, Earth would not only be a distant world, it would be the day salvation came with fire. And in the shadows of space, more desperate voices began to whisper. If Earth answered once, maybe they would answer again. If Earth stood against predators here, perhaps they would stand again where darkness ruled. Humanity had become more than a world. They had become a symbol. The galaxy had watched. The galaxy had learned. And as the fleets of Earth turned for home, their banners bright against the stars, one truth echoed louder than the silence of space itself. When the weak cry for help, humanity listens. When the innocent are hunted, humanity rises. And when Earth unleashes its wrath, no power in the galaxy can stand against it. The desperate plea had awakened the storm. The storm had swept through the stars. And now the galaxy would never be the same again.